Oh, Leanne.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the January 12th, 2021 Sandag EMP Working Group meeting. Before we jump to the meeting, I'll ask our working group lead, Kim, to confirm that we have a quorum.
Yes, we do. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. I'd like to update the members and public on our new process for both member and public comments. The primary members will be using their cameras and we will take live public comments. Members are asked to turn on their cameras when they have a comment and question, and then I can recognize you. Because this is a new process for all of us, I'm going to ask Kim Smith to go over the basic instructions for both working group members and members of the public to participate in the meeting. Kim?
Okay, so as noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to email comments, the public can also provide live comments during our working group meeting. In order to provide live comments, first you need to register for the Zoom meeting on the link provided on the cover page of the agenda. Join the meeting by clicking on the link in the confirmation email you'll receive. When public comments are called for on an item, click on the raise hand icon in the Zoom control panel. It should be on the top right of the screen. You will be called on by the name you registered with, and then you can provide comments. There is no need to mute your microphone. We will be able to unmute you when you're called on. The instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of Sandag's website at www.sandag.org. All comments, whether emailed or live, will be made part of today's meeting record.
Okay, and as I was told when I started this, the meeting is being recorded. So does that sound good? We'll give it a try. Great. So let's get started with item number 1, which is approval of the September 8th, 2020 meeting minutes. And those were in the handout that was emailed to everyone. May I have a motion?
I have to have a recollection first, then I'll
Yeah.
give you a motion. September 8th, 1948. So moved.
1948.
Yeah, that's when I was born.
Oh. Do I have a second?
This is Trish Smith and I second.
Thanks, Trish. Thanks, Jim. Okay. Do we have any public comments on the minutes? I don't see any hands raised or anybody coming on. Okay. So seeing none, I'll ask Kim Smith to begin the roll call vote, please.
Okay, so first will be County of San Diego, Leanne Carmichael.
Aye.
Okay, next will be City of San Diego. I saw Dan, you're on, but also Christie's also on, I believe.
Yeah, she should be joining soon, but I'll vote aye.
I think she, okay. All right, is it a yes or a no?
Yes.
Okay. City of Santee, Melanie Cush. Melanie?
Yes, I'm here.
City of Carlsbad, Roseanne Humphrey.
Yes.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
City of Poway is absent. City of Chula Vista, I believe they're absent. City of Oceanside, Stephanie Cervantes.
Yes.
Okay. Army Corps is absent. I don't see Bruce. Caltrans is not here. Dave Mayer, Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Yes.
Thank you, Dave. Susan Wynn, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yes.
Kirsten Winter, U.S. Forest Service.
Yeah, I have to abstain. I was not at the prior meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Fisher, USGS.
Yes.
Thank you. Wildlife Conservation Board's not here. Ann Harvey, San Diego Conservation Network.
Yes.
Trish Smith, the Nature Conservancy.
Yes.
Candace Woe, San Diego Foundation.
Yes.
And then Jim Whalen.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, now let's move on to item number 2, public and member comments. I will ask members of the public who wish to offer comment, not related on today's agenda to please raise your hand at this time. I don't see any hands raised. Do you, Kim?
Ann, did you have your hand up or
No,
no?
thank you. No.
Okay. No, I don't.
Okay. Are there any comments from members?
I have comments, but if any members have comments, I'll let you guys go first.
Not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, then I
Ted,
will.
go.
Okay, I just have a few announcements. So as you can see, Leanne is hosting our meeting today. Christina Alicio is no longer our chair of the working group, but I just wanted to say publicly, give her a big thank you for, being a chair for many years and always, at Regional Planning Committee and the board, really always having our voice. So I just, if she's listening, just wanted to give her thank you. And we definitely appreciate all her efforts. And we hope to have a chair named sometime in March. So I believe January, the vice chair of our board and all the other committee members get appointed, and then it just moves further down the line. So by March, we should have a chair appointed. And then many of you guys already know Courtney Pesh. Courtney, you want to turn your camera on, but she was our intern for the EMP program and the working group for a couple years, and she successfully competed in the regional planner promotion series and was successful. So now she is a permanent employee of Sandag, and she will be assisting with all things EMP. So yay.
Oh, good for you.
And then finally, our ad hoc committee for the 10th cycle of the Land Management Grant Program is going to be meeting at the end of January to review and come up with recommendations for the criteria. And we are planning to come back in March to get approval from the working group and then move that forward to Regional Planning Committee. So we are moving forward on that after some delay. So that's it.
Well, thank you, Kim. I also want to voice my thanks and appreciation for Christine. She was a great chair. I'm going to miss her, and I do hope we get someone by March. That's a selfish hope. So, but I really do want to thank her for her efforts and her time leading our group. And Courtney, congratulations! That's awesome news. So if there's no further comments, and I'm not seeing any hands raised, then we'll move on to item number 3, the regional plan vision and San Diego County TerraCount assessment. So this is a 3-part item with opportunity for discussion after the presentations. First, we'll have Kim Smith and Allison Wood from Sandag. They'll present an update on the 2021 regional plan and the 5 big moves and how this relates to the draft regional habitat conservation vision. Then we'll hear from Sarah Pierce, also from Sandag, and Mike Howard from Dudek on Sandag's TerraCount project. Let's start off with Kim and Allison.
Okay, I think Courtney, you've got it pulled up. Are you ready?
Can you not see this?
Yeah. Can everybody see that? I think we're good.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay,
Perfect.
thanks, Leanne, and thanks everybody for being here virtually today. So today, Allison and I will be presenting an update on the 2021 regional plan and the 5 big moves and how this relates to our draft regional habitat conservation vision. I'm going to begin the presentation by giving a recap on the development of the habitat conservation vision, and then I'm going to turn it over to Allison to discuss the 2021 regional plan. So Sandag staff has been working for the past year with some members of our EMP working group and also our other regional partners. Some of those are shown on the slide above, on the development of this regional habitat conservation vision. And I believe we came to the working group in June of what seems like many moons ago, and outlined the vision, the draft vision that we put together. So next slide, Courtney. So our vision outlines the challenge the San Diego region is facing with the loss and degradation of sensitive habitats, invasive species, and changes in climate that are driving many species to extinction at an increasing rate. Next slide, please. So what are we going to do about it? What is our vision? It's pretty simple. Protect, connect, and respect species and their natural habitats to prevent extinction in San Diego County. Next slide. And what are our vision goals? Well, first, protect existing habitats by maintaining, restoring, and monitoring and acquiring high priority lands. Connect those linkages and wildlife corridors, and then connect people with local species and nature. And finally, respect through education, youth outreach. What are the impacts of recreation, human use, and the human health and well-being? In addition, as part of this vision, we also identified those barriers, opportunities, and gaps, and what resources are needed for implementation. So how do we expect to get there? Well, habitat conservation is a component that will be covered in the 2021 regional plan. Specifically, it's included in the Sustainable Communities Strategy, or SCS. The Sustainable Community Strategy will guide efforts to meet or exceed the greenhouse gas targets while maintaining quality of life in the San Diego region. So we're in the process of developing a white paper on that includes our regional habitat conservation vision, to include in the regional plan to further support policies and programs that can provide a platform for future funding that can help us accomplish the goals that you see before you. In addition, we can also look to expanding these goals and really see how habitat conservation can further play a role in carbon sequestration and the reduction of greenhouse gases. And you'll be hearing a little bit more about that in our second presentation. That's on our TerraCount tool. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Allison Wood to talk about the 2021 regional plan. Allison,
Kim,
there you go.
we go. So I have just a couple slides to kind of give an update on where we're at in developing the 2021 regional plan. And then I'm going to have Courtney share a video with you all that is from Colleen Clemenson, our planning director, that gives a little bit more of an overview of the vision for the 2021 regional plan. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Courtney. So as a reminder, this plan is really built around the 5 big moves. And so these are 5, interreliant strategies for the transportation system. We have our complete corridors, our transit leap, so sort of new innovative transit service in the region, our mobility hubs, which are areas of activity in the region where we see the need to facilitate access to transit and also where we see growth and development being focused in the future. Our flexible fleets are providing kind of first last mile connections or other on-demand services to support the transit service. And then the next operating system is really technology throughout the transportation system that helps things work seamlessly. So next slide, Courtney. So I'll just sort of click through these that give an overview of the network. So we have a complete system of managed lanes proposed in this network that would include transitioning either general purpose or shoulder lanes to managed lanes. So this is not new widening overall. Next click. We have improvements on the rural corridors that are really focused on safety and evacuation preparedness. Next one. We have a connected commuter rail system. So really bringing high-speed rail system to key parts of the region. Next click. And then this is complemented with our light rail system and our rapid transit network that reaches further into communities in the region. And then we have our regional mobility hub network. So these are some pink areas that should come up. Courtney, if you could click, there we go. And these are really important. I want to pause here for a second because for you all in thinking about our land use policies in this plan, we're really looking at our mobility hubs as areas to focus future growth in the region. And acknowledging that these are areas that are existing communities and are most supported by transit service. And so, one thing we'll want to get input on from you all is, from your perspective, what are some of the benefits of this type of development pattern? We understand a lot of this from VMT reduction and things like that are really highlighted in the plan. But we also know focusing growth and development here preserves our open space and natural habitats. So we definitely want to get input from you all on kind of telling that story about our region too. So that's my last slide. And Courtney, if you want to go ahead and play the video, give you guys a little bit more background on the vision for the plan. We'll give Courtney just a minute.
1 second, everybody. Sorry about that. And then, get out of full screen. There we go. And share. Movies, share. Can everyone see this black screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm Colleen Clemenson, Planning Director for the San Diego Association of Governments. Today, I want to show you the vision for SANDAG's 2021 Regional Transportation Plan, a vision for a transportation system that's faster, fairer, and cleaner. One of the most important things SANDAG does is develop a regional transportation plan, a long-term blueprint for how we will grow and how we will get around. We update this plan every 4 years to account for factors like population growth, economic trends, new laws, and evolving technologies. We took a different approach this time, making this one of our most transformational updates ever. Historically, SANDAG planned to improve traffic by widening roadways where we have bottlenecks and adding transit in the same corridors, hoping people will use it. Now we have much better data about where people are coming and going, and new technologies have widely expanded our transportation options. Laws about air quality and protecting our environment have been strengthened, and the need to address social inequities has become urgent. And technology has matured to a point where we can dramatically improve what we have and realistically plan for new ways of getting around. Clearly, we must also account for the COVID-19 pandemic and all the unknowns it has created. At the same time, we must recognize the fundamental things that will remain the same. Our major residential areas, schools, universities, and job centers aren't going anywhere. 90% of what is here now will be here in the foreseeable future. And when the pandemic passes, we will have traffic congestion again. We are already seeing this, even though a good percentage of people are telecommuting. We need to be thinking for the long term, and we will need this vision. Our planning team spent the last 15 months pouring through data, reviewing mountains of public input, and researching the latest transportation innovations. What we have developed is a vision for a transportation system that's faster, fair, and cleaner. Faster by reducing traffic congestion and speeding up transit, connecting our communities. Fair by investing in a system that increases affordable transportation choices, and cleaner by ensuring we meet state and federal environmental standards. Today, our roadways are inefficient. Multiple studies have shown that adding lanes actually increases traffic. Within a matter of months, traffic jams return. We need to address the inequality in the transportation system as it relates to low income, minority and senior populations, and ensure that all of our residents have equal access to things like high quality jobs, education, and healthcare. There are many legislative mandates that must be met. State and federal laws call for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and reducing air pollution. New targets set by the state require the San Diego region to reduce the number of miles traveled per person. These laws require Sandag to meet the targets through transportation and land use solutions by getting people to walk, bike, share rides in carpools, van pools, on transit, and making shorter trips. The newest state law, Senate Bill 743, requires that any transportation project that increases vehicle miles traveled, such as roadway widenings, must mitigate for that increase with a project that does not increase vehicle miles traveled, such as public transit, walking, and biking. We have some big challenges and some big goals. How do we get the job done? With the 5 big moves: flexible fleets, mobility hubs, transit leap, complete corridors, and the next operating system. 5 interreliant strategies that, when linked together, can link our transportation system in a way never done before. Together, they provide a new and powerful way of addressing the region's transportation problems that we've struggled with for decades. Transit rarely gets us within walking distance of where we want to go. We change that using the 5 big moves. Flexible fleets solve that problem by providing connections that extend the reach of transit, vastly increasing the number of people who could use transit as a viable commuting option. Mobility hubs connect communities across the region so that people will have an alternative to having to own a car. And for transit to be competitive with the automobile, it needs to be fast. This is what we call transit leap: commuter rail, light rail, and the next gen rapid, all providing convenient, safe, affordable transportation. Complete corridors allow us to use technology to organize and manage our corridors and to streamline traffic in a more manageable way and provide equitable access to meeting our daily needs. The glue that really holds these strategies together is technology. We call it the Next OS. It allows us to optimize the overall system by wirelessly connecting vehicles, coordinating traffic signals, and providing real-time information for our travelers. This technology was not as mature a decade ago, but technology will dominate the future of transportation. Together, the 5 big moves are 5 interdependent strategies that give us a real shot at solving our transportation problems. That is what is so brilliant about this vision. The vision for the 2021 regional plan is a long-term investment in the region's future, developed through data, analysis, and input from you. The well-being of our region, this wonderful place we call home, depends on us to make meaningful changes today.
Right. So I think before we jump into a discussion, we're going to have Sarah and Mike present a little bit on the TerraCount project, and then, really interested in your thoughts and how we kind of bring all of these ideas together, the habitat vision with the regional plan and with this TerraCount project. So I'll hand it over to Sarah and Mike now.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. Hi to the working group members. I know most of you, it's been a while since I've attended one of your meetings, so thank you for having me back. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Pierce. I'm a planner on our climate resilience team here at Sandag. And so, as Allison said, you've had a little bit of a refresher on sort of this habitat conservation vision, a brief overview of the regional plan. Now we're going to move on to item 3B, which introduces some recent work that SANDAG has started doing on carbon sequestration. So myself and Mike Howard from DUDEC will be presenting this item. We'll take a little bit of time toward the end just to gather some very specific feedback that we're looking at from you on a couple of project elements. And then we'll hand it back over to Kim and Allison for this sort of broader discussion, tying all these details together. So Courtney, go ahead and hit the next slide for me, please. So this is just a little overview of what we're going to go over today. I'm going to give just a brief overview of what TerraCount is, and then I'll hand it over to Mike to really get into the nitty-gritty of all these very interesting details. And so he'll be doing the majority of our presentation today. Go ahead, Courtney. So what is TerraCount? Before I dive in here, I'll back up just a step and say that SANDAG was awarded some money from the Department of Conservation to do this project. And we are one of 3 regions in the state who are sort of beta testing this tool. Mariposa is another area that received funding, and Santa Barbara County. So you're welcome to Google as I'm talking if you'd like a little bit more information, but if you go on the Department of Conservation's website, you'll find a lot of information about this tool, TerraCount. Basically, it's a scenario planning tool kind of developed for planners like us who are sort of looking at long-range plans. And it was piloted for Merced County. And there's a really interesting document called Resilient Merced, which gives some great information on sort of how this tool works, what the outputs are, and sort of what Merced is doing with that information. The goal of this TerraCount tool is really to perform an assessment of the carbon sequestration and carbon storage potential of natural and working lands. So really focusing in on open space and agricultural lands. So the tool does explore the greenhouse gas emissions of other land uses, like urban development, like grasslands, things like that. But really the focus is on that open space and ag. And through the tool, we can also look at how applying different land management activities can change the greenhouse gas implications of different land uses, and also what some of the co-benefits are of those different land management activities. Next slide, Courtney. So just to kind of drill in, what do I mean by management activities? We're thinking about things like compost application. We're thinking about things like riparian restoration, and in the urban area, urban tree planting. So how does sort of changing these management strategies around lead to benefits like water quality improvements? You can think about that. If we think about restoring a riparian area, there's probably going to be some other co-benefits that come up from that. So those are some of the things that the tool allows us to explore. Go ahead, Courtney. So there's a lot in this slide here. I'm going to try to keep this pretty high level. Mike will kind of go through some of these details when he starts talking here. But basically the process of running this TerraCount tool is kind of a four-stage process, if you will. We're kind of in the middle of this work at the moment. But essentially what you do is you start with figuring out what are all the land uses in your particular area. For SANDAG, we're looking at the San Diego region as a whole. The data set that this tool, this TerraCount tool is built around is land fire data. Some of you may be familiar with that, others may not be. It's open source data, it's available on the web. And essentially what you do to start with is you pick 2 years of those land use data sets, and you determine an average rate of change for each land use type that you have in your area. And then we also look at our information that we have from CARB, the California Air Resources Board, to figure out, which of those land uses sequester carbon, which of them emit carbon, so we can assign kind of a carbon value, if you will, to each of those land use types. Our second step is to really do some baseline scenario planning. So we extrapolate that inventory that we've gathered in our first step, and we come up with a business as usual scenario. So if everything continued developing the way it has done in the past, what would the San Diego region kind of look like in 2050 if we didn't change up how things were going. At some point in there, we want to figure out which of these co-benefits we really want to learn more about. So we'll be kind of figuring that out as we go today. And then we move on to the final step, which is really where this connection to our regional plan comes in, and that's the forecasting step. So we know what our carbon values are, and we can apply those to different scenarios that we're looking at in our regional plan, including this sort of sustainable community strategy scenario that I think Allison just kind of mentioned. So then we can kind of compare and contrast, you know, which of these scenarios sort of looks better from a carbon perspective, if you will. And then there's this sort of other element that I just mentioned, looking at how different land management activities can also change those carbon values as well. So there's a lot going on here, but we are big picture, you know, hoping that this really gives us some insight and some information to chew on and to capture in our regional plan as we move forward with that planning process. So Courtney, you can go ahead and hit the next slide, and I will hand it over to Mike to really get into the nitty-gritty of this tool. Take it away, Mike.
Hey, thanks, Sarah. Again, my name is Mike Howard. I'm a senior biologist with DUDEC, and I specialize in regional habitat conservation planning type projects, and I'm the lead on this TerraCount project. So I'm going to go through a number of technical slides, and then at the end, Sarah and I will ask for some input from folks. So first, as Sarah mentioned, the model requires, TerraCount requires two land covered data set inputs and from 2 historical years, and so Landfire is a nationwide multi-agency remote sensing data, land cover data set, and it's kind of unique in that it's repeated over time. So on approximately every 2 years they update it, sometimes every 4, but it's intended to be used for monitoring things over time, and so it's kind of ideal for this purpose, and is how the developers of TerraCount envision using Landfire. Their pilots use Landfire, and so even though we've got good regional vegetation data sets in our county that might be preferable in terms of this model, we needed to use Landfire. We did go through some customization on that. We needed to aggregate all the various land cover types into land cover classes. So we've done that, and we've got 11 classes, aggregated classes that you'll see in a second. Those were generally following the pilots kind of model for how those aggregations were made. We also look closely at agricultural lands in the county because a number of the management activities are associated with ag lands, and also the nitrous oxide emissions are tied to those lands. And so we did go through a process of updating Landfire both in 01 and 2016 with additional data, including the DWR statewide crop mapping, and then we also evaluated it compared to the San Diego County's crop commodity information. And we also, the last thing we did in terms of customization to the 2 layers, if anyone's familiar with Landfire, each vegetation type in the Landfire data set also has height and cover associated with it. So this should be V instead of C. So there's a little error on my slide there. So for example, chemise chaparral, if that's the existing vegetation type, it also has 8 to 10 classes of cover and 8 to 10 classes of height within each chemise chaparral raster. And so the raw data, there's thousands of different combinations. We bend these classes somewhat to reduce the number of categories or combinations. But in 01, we had something like 680 combinations in the county, and over 800 in 2016. You can go to the next slide now, Courtney. So then based on that, so here's the two maps of the 01 and the 2016 land fire data sets just collapsed on that land cover class. So, you know, there's hundreds of combinations within each color, but this is kind of a simpler view. And our county is sort of unique over this period for a number of reasons, which has some implications for the results on carbon. As folks know, obviously we had the big fires between this period, between 01 and 16, which are our two data set years here. We had the 03 and 07 fires, and also, you know, over this period, a fair amount of development. And so we do see a fair amount of change over that period. So forests went down 80,000 acres, grasslands went down 100,000 acres. Shrublands actually went up 7%, almost 100,000 acres. I think that's kind of a reflection of forests being burned and then recovering, and now showing up as shrublands, or showing up as shrublands in the 2016 data. We also saw a fair amount of agricultural loss during that period, something like over 40,000 acres. So that's a 40% reduction in acreage of agriculture over that period. And then an increase in developed and barren. So you can go to the next slide. So now we've got two layers for land cover. And then the process you go through is then you assign carbon stocks to each type. So like I described, we've got Chemise chaparral, for example. We've got, that's the existing type on the ground. And we've got a number of different cover classes and a number of different height classes. The California Air Resources Board natural and working lands inventory data was used to then assign carbon stock values to each different combination of existing vegetation, height and cover. These are kind of the main sources of information. ARB has done quite a bit of work on natural and working lands over the past 10 years in particular. So the Battles and the Saha paper are some key references in terms of how we determined how much carbon is in each type. So we did that for the 01 and the 2016, and so that's for all non-soil carbon pools. So that's above ground live, above ground dead, below ground live, below ground dead, all that. Typical units for that are in metric tons of carbon per hectare. And so that's what our inventory is in. For soils, we use the tier 1, the IPCC tier 1 method, which is a fairly basic method for assigning soil carbon or carbon to the soils using the soil taxonomy. So we use the soil mapping that's available in the county. And then we assigned emissions for nitrous oxide and methane to the agriculture and wetland types following the model that Merced County used. So we can go to the next slide now. So I'll show a couple of results in terms of the inventory. This is one of them. It gives you an idea of kind of the average amount of carbon or carbon density for the vegetation types. So remember, there's multiple types within forest, for example. This is just showing kind of the average of the forest. Forests are obviously the highest carbon density types in terms of land cover. It can also have a high variability. Those bars on there kind of show the standard deviation on those averages. So you can get really high carbon density forest types. Shrublands are also our other high carbon density types in the county. Another thing that's interesting on this slide is if you look at the forest trend and the shrubland trend, you can see from 01 to 2016, the average within forests and in shrublands are going down. And so I think that's a reflection of, one, perhaps the fires, but just in general, we're seeing in the forest category less carbon dense types in 2016 than in 01. So then we can go to the next slide. And so then I've got a couple of stories to tell here, maybe. This is the numbers from our inventory, and I've got a map to kind of represent this, but I thought I'd run through the numbers real quick. There we go. So these are expressed in metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, which is kind of how the roll-up inventory tends to use this unit instead of the carbon. So this is carbon dioxide equivalents. But what you can see here are, I'll highlight some things. So we've seen a decline in total carbon in the county, from 250 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent down to 238. That's about a 6% decline over those 15 years. It's about 0.4% per year. I don't think that's a surprise, but it is certainly something to consider. And then when you look at what's happening within each class, I think you can see, for example, forests is where we're seeing the biggest decline. That's the reflection both of an acreage decline, but also the conversion to lower density carbon or vegetation types within the forests. Similar things happening with the shrublands, but our shrubland acreage is actually going up over that period, but our carbon content is still declining. A couple of other things in here. I mean, there are some relics from the mapping. You can see an increase in wetlands over that period. There were some changes in the land fire classification scheme for wetlands that I think is accounting for a fair amount of that increase. And so I don't think we're going to see a 21% increase in wetlands, annually. So we've got to make some adjustments to the trends, which I'll talk about in a second. And then you can see the amount of emissions for nitrous oxide from the agricultural lands and methane from the wetlands are also attached to each pixel. And so we can go to the next slide. So real quick, just how does San Diego compare? How do those numbers compare to other counties? You can see our numbers there were also on the previous slide. We're a pretty big county, 2.7 million acres. There were a couple of other counties that have completed a similar assessment countywide using these same methods or very similar methods. Merced County, like Sarah mentioned, was the first pilot for this tool. And you can see their results there about at 50 million metric tons and not much change over the period. Merced County is quite a bit different than San Diego County. Obviously, it's about half the size, but also it's largely agricultural and grasslands. So very little forests and shrublands in that county if you're looking at the land cover. And so that makes sense why their carbon values are lower than ours. Sonoma County, kind of in converse to that, is almost a third the size, or a little over the third the size of our county, but is comparable in terms of total carbon in the county. And that's a reflection of Sonoma County being more forested and shrubland. So our numbers are in the realm of the other counties that have done a similar assessment. We can go to the next slide. So here's the kind of visual representation of that. So this is total carbon, soil and non-soil metric tons carbon dioxide equivalent per pixel, and you can kind of see the change over time from 01 on your left to 2016 on your right. Go to the next slide. So that's kind of the results section of the presentation. And this is kind of the current stage we're at, like Sarah mentioned. We're into the scenario, developing the scenario stages. And so there's a number of different things to consider, and this is sort of a work in progress. Because we've got the 01 and the 2016 information in terms of carbon, we can figure out what that trend is going out to 20. And so that's what's reflected on this chart and in this table. You can see it kind of extrapolating that trend. We're seeing carbon content declining in the county, continuing to decline. I think we're working to make some adjustments to the baseline scenario. One thing that you could see from the trend was that agriculture was declining in the county. What the extrapolation of that shows is that it goes to zero prior to 2050, and so that's something we're looking at, whether we want to show that or whether that's realistic to show as a 2050 baseline. We're also, you can see we've made some adjustments to the mapping relic issue with regard to water and wetlands, kind of held those constant for the baseline. So this is a work in progress. This is where we would bring in land use scenarios from Allison and Sarah at Sandag, looking at business as usual, but also the SCS scenario to evaluate how those different land use scenarios affect carbon storage. Yeah, so we can go to the next slide now. So we're working on the baseline scenario for 2050. We would also want to explore using the tool, what the implications of doing different management activities are. So these are user inputs into the model. So you can enter, I'm going to do 10,000 acres of riparian restoration between now and 2050. And then the model will evaluate both the carbon content changes or carbon storage changes resulting from those activities, but also what the complementary benefits are. So you're going to do those 10,000 acres of riparian restoration. How does that benefit other non-carbon related things like water quality? So the complementary benefits are GIS outputs. The management activities are inputs into the model. So we can go to the next slide then. So this is our list. This is the list that the model was developed on, or developed to evaluate in terms of management activities. So you can enter various inputs for these activities. So there's a set of activities for working lands, like cover crops or mulching. And so you'd enter how many acres of agriculture you're going to do these activities on, or how many acres of riparian you're going to do. And then the model then evaluates what the co-benefits of those activities are. So this is kind of the next step. And so we thought it would be a good idea at this stage in our planning process to talk with this group and get some feedback, particularly about the management activities. Which ones would this group be interested in exploring? Are there any of these activities already happening? That sort of thing. So I don't know, Sarah, if you have other thoughts here, or if we want to raise their hand if they have input or feedback for us here.
Yeah, that would be great. If you are on the line currently and you do have just kind of some initial thoughts, if you wouldn't mind just maybe putting your hand up just so we can kind of facilitate that. I realize that we have also just thrown a lot of information at you at sort of one period of time. So we'll coordinate with Kim as well to make sure that we send this slide and these questions out in our emails so that you're welcome to email us as well if something kind of jogs your memory after. But I do see Michael Beck, you've got your hand raised, so go ahead and unmute yourself. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I may have missed a few things. I had something going on. So obviously our group is focused on the natural lands categories. And as I understood what I heard, the intent here is to develop strategies to increase carbon sequestration through these various activities. Is there an implementation strategy associated with this at all? I mean, obviously this boils down to doing restoration work or conversion work on natural lands to increase the health of those veg communities and generate these metrics, which are certainly know where these activities can take place, anybody who's on the ground doing the work, as well as the wildlife agencies and so on. So what's the implementation strategy here?
Hey, Mike, you kind of jogged in and out a little bit there with the audio, but I think I captured most of what you have to say. So at this point in time, this is really just kind of more of an exploration tool, if you will. We want to kind of gauge, like, you know, let's say that there's, I don't know, 100 acres of land in our region that maybe we could restore, do oak woodland restoration on. What does that mean for the carbon, you know, stocks? What does that mean for the carbon value? Just to kind of provide some more insight. So we're not necessarily at a stage where we're looking at projects and looking at implementation. Really, this tool is really more to just kind of give us more information at this point in time, if that makes sense.
And so what kind of input can we provide?
So the input we're looking at from you is sort of what's reasonable for our region. You know, is it reasonable to assume that all of our native grassland will be restored, or should we be maybe thinking about it as a smaller percentage? You know, are there areas where projects are already planned and you could say, yeah, you know, right now we've got, you know, this whole riparian area that'll be restored in the next 10 years. You know, maybe you should look at that and see what that, you know, would do to the carbon stocks. I guess it's that kind of insight that we're looking for from you all.
Okay, our question then, if we do have such, and we have many of them, areas that are being restored from degraded habitat to native habitat, certainly don't have wherewithal to do the analysis to determine before and after outcomes. Who does that?
So, Mike, your audio for me cut in and out a little bit. Mike, I don't know if you caught that. Mike Howard.
I didn't catch very much of it. I'm sorry.
I'll try one more time. I'll stop talking. If we have areas that are being restored from degraded to natural, you're talking about who measures that? Are you expecting who does work to determine the value?
Mike, I'm so sorry, but it was even worse that time. So maybe what I'll have you do, if you don't mind, is if you wouldn't mind responding via email once Kim sends out that follow-up email, that would be really helpful. I'd love to hear your perspective, and we can try to answer your question that way.
Or
Mike could also use the chat function.
Yeah,
In the chat right now.
If you want to read it or type it into the chat, then I can read the question.
I think he was asking who determines the before and after. But I guess my question is from a scale standpoint. I mean, none of the restoration that we're currently doing is at any sort of scale that would be measurable at the county level that you're looking at. Maybe with the exception of, to the extent that, you know, areas are recovering from the fires, you know, as that vegetation naturally grows back, and maybe we encourage it to grow back you know, to shrubs and trees and not the, you know, disturbed grasses that are coming in some places. I mean, that could be a scale that's significant enough that maybe we get closer back to our baseline. I guess one question I had was, you know, again, trying to think of something that's occurring at a scale that's going to mean something is kind of the ongoing conversion of agriculture. I mean, it looks like there's a huge increase in vineyards. If I kind of was trying to look at your tables, you know, conversely, I think we're losing avocados. You know, are avocados becoming vineyards, or are natural habitats becoming vineyards? Like what type of land is turning into the vineyards? Does that seem to, you know, I don't know.
Right, the vineyards did have a really high percentage. It started with a very low acreage though. And so acreage wise, the vineyard increase isn't substantial.
Significant either.
I think the loss of ag lands though is substantial. I think looking at the trend just based on the land fire trend, I mean the ag lands blink out by 2030 or 2035 based on just the rate between 2001 and 2016. You know, who knows? I mean, who knows if that's the real, if that rate would continue, if it's going to slow. But that's what the trend in land fire shows. I get your question though, Susan, on the scale though, like a 100-acre riparian project is not going to be at the scale that you're going to be able to pick it up. But is it reasonable to say we could do 5,000 acres of oak woodland in the next 35 years, or 10,000 acres of oak woodland restoration, or is that not a reasonable number? In terms of the avoided, I mean, there's also this urban category is what we're exploring a little bit with scenarios, you know, avoided conversion, but there's also a tool in TerraCount that you can lock in. We can, you know, conserve that.
So you could hardwire our reserves to show that they're not going to convert.
Yeah.
What else? And then my last question is, so thinking about like, you know, there's a big article in the paper this weekend about looking at the salt marshes and things. And so does this factor in like sea level rise? And so as we lose our salt marshes, how does that affect these calculations?
Certainly we're not factoring in sea level rise, and we are not doing blue carbon. So we're water, you know, reservoirs and things in the county are essentially assigned a zero carbon, you know, value, and then we're not dealing with emissions, and things. So a caveat or a limitation to the study of the sea level rise issue.
Robert?
Yeah, I have on your urban, it seemed like it wasn't increasing in the carbon, and you know, on this last slide you have the urban tree planting, and it just seems like as these urban communities continue to senesce, let's say, and get older, there's way more urban forests that are taking place, and that number of carbon in the urban landscape should really be going up, and it really didn't in the 2050 prediction you had, especially as we're replacing scrublands with urban in certain areas. That 30 years of urban woodland development in those landscapes should really be changing the carbon sink in that landscape, and I didn't see that was really accounting for it that well. The thing that really scared me was that forest loss, and I didn't know if we could use like NAPE imagery or some other imagery that we have for those same time periods to validate some of that forest loss, to confirm that, you know, really is 80,000 acres or whatever the estimate is. I can believe that forest density changed quite a bit because of maybe changes in forest management practices, you know, and that once we burned up older growth forests that had been where fire had been suppressed, and we're replacing them with lower density forests, I could see some of that difference. But it seems like you could validate it with better data at a higher resolution than the land fire, just to validate elements of your modeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the kind of like I mentioned, we kind of had just gotten to the completion of the inventory and looking at some of those results and seeing what we were seeing with the forests and the grasslands. Frankly, I would like to dig into that a little bit more, Robert, and see what's really happening there. When we were evaluating which land fire data sets to use, we were originally kind of looking at 08 to 16 to avoid the fires, but when you look at the 08 land fire and the 2014, I believe, land fire, it's a different type. So a lot of those areas that burned were showing up as grasslands or low density scrub, and so that just wasn't a good year to select, because we'd have such a delta between if we selected 01 and then selected 08, then that shrub, those forests and shrublands are gone. If we choose 08 to 16, then you've got all the regrowth happening and the delta will be bigger.
I think the 2001 to 2016 is a good time period, because you're predicting out another 30 years from that,
right,
as baseline. So I think you want that longer time period. I'm just saying that for both of those data sets, there's other contemporary data you could look at to evaluate at a higher resolution, some statistical frame, so some subsample to get at what the variance is in forest loss. So is it really 80,000 plus or minus 40,000 acres, or is it, because we didn't see any variance in those calculated values. And I think that would help us think about kind of management scenarios forward, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Robert.
And I think Kim just sent me a quick message. I think we've got time for maybe a couple more comments here in the forum, and then we'll sort of move it into the next phase of the discussion just to keep things moving. So Dave Mayer and then Megan Jennings. So Dave, go ahead.
I just wanted to express one concern, and that's looking at the riparian restoration, where there are all kinds of opportunities for the restoration. But just the existing condition is such that, because development's narrowed those riparian corridors quite a bit, and there's been at least a number of examples I'm aware of where mass transit, whether it's trolley or commuter bike trails or whatever it might be, is trying to push into those same riparian corridors. We need to either be thinking about buffering them out to accommodate those new uses, or some alternative location maybe for some of those human-based movement that we're seeking. Again, a number of places where I've seen them just trying to fit it in, and there's not a lot of room left for the wildlife.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sarah, do you want to take Kirsten, and then I can move over to the attendees?
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is Kirsten with the Cleveland National Forest. So the Forest Service, as you might suspect, we've also been tracking oak mortality and forest losses. And actually, we've got kind of a study of this going on right now. So the forest losses have been pretty high. You've probably seen that locally after the Cedar Fire and some of the other fires in Laguna Quimaca Mountains. And so this is actually, we have an ecologist working on some of these issues right now, Sarah Hennessy. So I would like to connect her to Mike Howard to potentially discuss some of these data and results. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to allow Megan to. Megan, can you?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great, thanks. I just had a few brief comments connected to Kirsten's comment. One suggestion was, in addition to the restoration strategies for natural lands, is to consider forest health projects as a management activity. While that does reduce the total carbon storage, overall, a more resilient forest will make for more permanent carbon stocks or more sustainable carbon stocks. And I think it's worth considering, especially because the work that Kirsten is referring to is intended to help, I think, sort of guide and promote more forest health strategies and projects moving forward, both in the San Diego region and beyond across Southern California. Another suggestion was, while I know the TerraCount tool is built more to think about management activities that can promote carbon or carbon sequestration and co-benefits, I think it's also worth considering the impact of fuels reduction strategies, which decreases carbon stocks, but it's something that we do, sort of to Susan's point about scale across the landscape. We do this at a very large scale across the landscape. It affects carbon sequestration value, it affects co-benefits. And I think it's worth considering the impacts that has across the landscape. And then the final comment I wanted to make was back on the point of permanence of carbon stocks. This is something we're working on in one of the projects I've got going on that I think I've discussed with Mike and Sarah, where we're looking at carbon stocks and the issue of permanence. And I think it might be worth, this is a little bit back on the scenarios, but is there a way to consider it in your scenarios where we are seeing a conversion from shrubland types or even forest types to non-native annual grasses? Some of the data sets we've been producing and others have produced, I think could help guide where we might see a loss of carbon stocks to help prioritize and target restoration activities. So I just wanted to throw that out as an additional idea for a way that this tool could perhaps inform not only what we should be doing, but perhaps where it would be most effective.
Thank you, Megan. Appreciate
Those
your
are great.
insight. And then Kim, I think from what you've just chatted me, we have Jim Whalen next, and then we probably need to wrap up this part and move on to 3C. Okay, Jim, go ahead.
Okay. Just 3 quick points. It looks like from the very first slide we saw it, all of the future development is in the redevelopment. That is to say, multifamily and not new single family. I wanted to clarify that because that's not realistic to think that everybody's going to live in multifamily. The other thing I think I've heard from others said that there have been some previous studies that have been done. Actually, SDMMP had that guy, Dr. Allen, in more than once. And I'm wondering how this meshes with that. The San Diego Foundation is also doing something on carbon sequestration as part of local carbon offset investigation. And then how does this mesh with the existing climate action plans? The county is starting up again, and the city of San Diego is already there. And it would appear like we could be running the risk of reinventing the wheel. That's all I had.
I'll jump in maybe and just respond to your last point, Jim. And then Mike, if you've got comments on the other points, I'll let you jump in. But just kind of on the cap question, Jim, you know, we've been engaged with the county and with a number of other local jurisdictions who have climate action plans that kind of specifically highlight open space and particularly ag and sort of conserving ag. And so they are interested in the results from this tool, but we haven't really gotten to a point yet where there's something really meaty to discuss with them. I don't think we're necessarily reinventing the wheel, but maybe adding information to that discussion, if you will. Again, I'll just note that this tool has only really been used once in the state. There are 3 regions, including San Diego, kind of beta testing it. It's certainly not perfect. It certainly could be more specific. There's things that I'm sure Mike would love to do to this tool. Number 1, to get it to work better, but number 2, to make it as accurately reflect, you know, our region as possible. But because it's sort of built around this land fire data set, we have to sort of work with sort of the way it's set up, if you will. So I don't see this as being the end all be all of this discussion. I see this as being one informational assessment that will probably be built on, and you know, we'll learn from it. We'll keep the discussions going with Megan Jennings, we'll keep the discussions going with the San Diego Foundation. We're aware of that work as well. So we're all, you know, trying to gather insight and sort of tell the same story and have it be informative as possible. Sorry, that was kind of a long answer. Mike?
From what I've seen, the CAPs tend to address this topic sort of from a different angle, and certainly CAPs are not using this tool to estimate carbon in their natural lands. This tool is, like Sarah mentioned, it's challenging to use. It is just a pilot. A few counties have done it. I'm not certain that all counties in the state are going to pick up the TerraCount tool and use it for all their CAPs. But it is a good tool for asking questions and about using it how we're going to use it. So I don't think it's reinventing the wheel in terms of information that goes in the CAP versus information that'll come out of TerraCount. Jim, your second question was on SDMMP and the San Diego Foundation work. I'll have to refresh my memory. You said a Dr. Allen has presented at San Diego MMP a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll look into those studies. I haven't looked at some of those. And then your first question was on multifamily new development, and that's not a question for me.
I know. Who's that a question for?
That's for our next discussion that we do need to move on. I know some folks put some questions in the Q&A and there's statements in the chat. So we're send out, or I'm going to send out some more information as far as where people can get in contact with you and to ask specific questions, and or we can have some sort of dialogue back and forth. But I think we've got to move on to our next discussion.
Okay, so good discussion on that. Hopefully more to come, hopefully more refinement and tying in with other efforts to come on that. So we'll move on to item number 4, Dr. Chris Preston and the SDMMP team. Yeah.
Liam, we actually have, that was just the specific discussion for the TerraCount for item 3B.
Oh, okay.
We actually have time we have about 10 minutes or so to, if anybody has any, we kind of glazed over the regional habitat conservation vision and the regional plan. Sure. And I think Allison and I were going to come back and maybe that's where Allison can help answer Jim's question. And if anybody else has any questions, both member and the public, we can get to those. And then we do need to move on to item number 4.
Okay, never mind, carry on.
So I can first address Jim's question about multifamily versus single family. I don't have that breakdown in front of me today, so I can't give you any numbers, but we are assuming more multifamily than single family for sure. It's also tied into our RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Assessment process as well, that is encouraging more higher density housing through that process. So the SCS is really trying to bring together RHNA with our, SB 375 goals with the transportation network as well.
Okay.
I can follow up on the breakdown.
The reason I raise it is because the people that want single family houses get them and they drive as far as they need to go to get it. And that should be taken into account because half of the greenhouse gases are from cars.
Right.
Not great, actually.
Understood.
To live in Temecula versus here, I mean, that's why Highway 15 is the way it is. So I think we're begging a question by not considering local single family homes, but we can keep going.
I don't see any other hands raised. Does do any other of the members have questions, comments?
Maybe I'll just share, Kim, that, our timeline for the regional plan is that we're working to get a draft of the regional plan out late this spring. And then we have to adopt the regional plan by the end of the year. So that gives you kind of an overview, and we'll be bringing more information to our board and to you all in the coming months.
Allison, is that at the end of the calendar year? You're
Yes,
expecting to be done? Okay. Okay. Does anybody else have any comments or questions from the group or from the public?
Hi, this is Stephanie. Can I just make a comment? So the city of Oceanside, we recently adopted an urban forestry ordinance that I wrote as part of the climate action plan, which is tied to new incoming development. So if you do need kind of like a case study or some just information about potential projects coming in, I'd be more than happy to give you that. We do have some major projects that are in the pipeline right now that do have to meet those urban forestry requirements. So I would be interested to see how the TerraCount would affect that for our areas.
I don't see any other hands raised, Leanne.
Okay. Well, are we ready to go on to item number 4 then? Yeah. So item number 4, Dr. Chris Preston and the SDMMP team will be giving an update on examples on the development of preserved metrics, specifically a preview of the web portal dashboard that is in development. Chris, are you ready? There we go. I can see it.
Chris, I don't think we can hear you.
Sorry, I was just saying, I don't have control of the lighting here. I'm not in my usual office, so I'm sorry. I think I just look like a shadow on the screen. Thank you. We're here again for another Preserve Metrics update. And today we're going to talk about what we've been doing. I'll be having the team share with you what they've been working on. And then we'd like to talk about how you might be able to provide input going forward. Next. As you've seen this, I think almost every single time, every meeting for the last year and a half, we are engaging in trying to come up with a report on the preserve of the health and the state of the preserve. And we're developing metrics for a data portal that we'll be publishing online that will just sort of talk about how the preserve system is doing over time. And so that's something that we are been coming back to you for more information and input on. Thank you. Next. And just a reminder, we have these indicators that we develop metrics for. So these are indicators of preserved system health, from species to vegetation and communities and habitats to landscape scale processes, which often can be considered threats as well. Some are natural processes and others are things like invasive species that are can be large scale threats across the preserved system. And so today we're not going to get into too many of these. We're just going to give you a couple examples, and then Emily's going to show you through our web portal on how you can in the future you'll be able to look at these. Next. And as a reminder for the species, we have the landscape species, which include wide-ranging animals that are most affected by connectivity or the loss of connectivity. We have rare and specialist species, which include some butterflies with very specific habitat requirements, the southwestern pond turtle found only in certain types of riparian, and then a number of rare plants. And then we have our habitat or community species that are indicative of different types of vegetation communities. Next. And for all of these, we're developing metrics, which are measures of some aspect of those species or those vegetation communities or those threats. And next, whoops. And we were here in June 2020 to present the framework to you. We were here in September to give you the draft mock-up of our report to the MP working group. And today we are here to present the progress we've been making and to come up with ways to get input from you all, more specific input. And in May, we'll be coming back with a draft report, and which we will hope you will review and provide comments on, and we'll finalize that in June. And then in July, we'll have our final report to the ITAC committee. Now, today I'm gonna have the team show you what they've been working on. The first team member is Chris from USGS, Chris Brown, and he's been working on southwestern pond turtle, which is a rare and specialist species.
Thank you, Chris and Kim. And I wanted to go over some of the metrics that we've been looking at for the indicator species, the southwestern pond turtle. The first metric that we've been studying as a potential metric is occurrence and recruitment. With this metric, it's a kind of a two-part metric. It has occurrence. This is a species that's associated with healthy permanent or semi-permanent riparian or ponding type habitat. The occurrence is really just the simple presence of the pond turtles at a site. And what we're calling a site or a population consists of either discrete ponds, networks of adjacent ponds, or quantifiable sections of streams. The second part to this is recruitment, and that's new individuals being added to the population. So this is primarily through reproduction, such that local pond turtles produce eggs which hatch, and then at the site, hatchlings persist and mature. Okay, next. And so what we're able to do with this metric is focus on viable populations of pond turtles. We're also able to look at populations that are natural but enhanced or restored or have restoration going on at the site, or populations that are newly created. And again, the two components, occupancy and recruitment. Next. And so what this means is that we can track the change in number of populations over time as management is applied in the preserve. And we can track the change in proportion of these populations recruiting, again, as management is applied in the preserve. And through this, we're able to track what's successful. We're able to track where we have the potential to restore, enhance habitat, or create new populations. Okay, next. And why we're doing it. So this is a species that has really been in decline region-wide, and it's really in bad shape in coastal San Diego. And we have lots of studies about it, and we've done lots of work to try and conserve it. So we have over 20 years of pond turtle data in the county. And occurrence and recruitment are recognized as a way to determine status of the pond turtle by many of the wildlife agencies. And there's academic rigor behind the metric as well, with publications coming out about currently about recruitment of the pond turtle or occupancy. And it's a way that we can have a quantitative scoring. So we can add this up in some sort of value that we can track over time. Next. And so an example of this might be, and what I've done is taken a subsample of the data and looked at it in 5-year timeframes and separated it out for occurrence by natural populations that are enhanced or restored and newly created. And so on the left-hand side, we have the map. On the right-hand side, we have a chart by those 5-year time periods. And so we can see 2005 to 10, and the next, as we have more data coming in, we see some more populations, and next. And we also have work and management coming in. And so we can see that we've added over time newly created populations of pond turtles to the preserve, and that we've added populations that we have restoration at over time. Okay, next. And so the second component again is the recruitment. And so this is showing populations that have juveniles in the green, populations that have adult females and males, but have not yet, have no detectable recruitment, that's yellow. And then populations that are either male only or female only, only adults, and that's in the red, the single sex. And so again, 2005 to 10, and then 2010 to 15, and then next 2015 to 20. And so we see that over time with management actions, we have increased the number of populations with juveniles present, so populations that are recruiting within the preserve. And so this kind of wraps up into a nice quantitative value that we can then present to public. Okay, next. And then other metrics we've been looking at include the aquatic invasive species like bullfrog and crayfish, which may predate upon the juveniles, water availability for climate resiliency, the amount of unmitigated roads near the population, so roads that don't have barriers on them, or ways to keep the turtles off the roads, and then illegal impacts such as unauthorized swimming, recreation, and harvesting, and off-road activities. And so these are things that we want to try and tie in the future. And now I believe Annabelle is up next.
Thank you, Chris. So we chose the cactus wren as an indicator of coastal sage scrub because it is only found in cactus scrub and its numbers are in rapid decline. The information we want to know about the wrens are their status over time, habitat quality, and the threats they're facing to inform management actions. The metrics we decided to focus on were the percent cover of cactus patch characteristics where they can occur and what we've done to improve their habitat. Next slide. So we chose to use a data set from the USGS due to its current long-term study with standardized surveys and vegetation assessments. And what you see is a map of cactus wren distribution around South County where detections and non-detections are displayed over the course of 5 years. What you'll see is in 2016, it'll only show non-detections because no surveys were conducted at that time. You can play that, the movie. And as you can see, there is some blinking in and out of areas like around Otay Mesa, but there is also some recruitment in different locations like around Chula Vista. Next slide. The following graphs represent the relative percent covers for the chosen metrics of habitat quality from 2015 through 2020. The data presented here does include private and unshared information that was excluded from the previous map. So what you will see are broad cover categories ranging from 0% to greater than 75% and are color-coded throughout the years. This graph shows the coverage of non-native annual plants found in survey plots, where we also included annual average rainfall amounts from both Chula Vista and El Cajon, since most surveys took place in or near those locations. For each year, everything to the left of the maroon bar, or the 5 to 25% cover category, is relatively low cover of invasive annuals. Everything to the right of the maroon bar are higher cover categories. So you can see an increase in invasive cover over time and an increase in higher cover categories following higher rainfall amounts in 2019 when compared to 2015, which was preceded by drought. Next slide. This graph shows the proportion of the cactus patch being affected by crowding or overtopping due to shrubs and or vines, which can potentially increase predator access to nests. Overcrowding has increased over time as well, with the slight increases seen in the pink and purple cover categories, which is 25 to 50% and greater than 50 to 75%. Next slide. And this graph shows the proportion of dead cactus in the survey plots, most of which did not exceed more than 5%, with the exception of 2015, which followed a drought year. Next slide. So from 2006 through 2017, just over $3 million has been invested into habitat management, with 284 acres of coastal sage scrub and cactus scrub being enhanced, restored, created, and protected with fencing. And next we have Sarah with invasive plants.
Thanks, Annabelle. So the indicator that I'm going to talk about right now is invasive plants. We chose this indicator because invasive plants are a large threat to our rare, threatened, and endangered plant and animal species, as well as the habitat and vegetation communities that they live in. So for this indicator, one of the metrics we chose is the number of acres and sites managed by herbicide treatment or manual removal. We chose this metric because Sandag has over 6 years of funding for early detection rapid response programs to remove those species. So this aids any previous invasive control efforts, and it aids in the restoration of MSP priority species threatened by the non-native invasive plants. So in this graph, you can see the main invasive plants that are targeted in that EDRR program. In yellow are the total number of sites worked. In green, it's the total acres surveyed, and in red is the total acres treated. So as part of the EDRR program, the sites are evaluated, assessed, monitored, and or treated. Next slide, please. So here are the invasive plant treatments by year. So starting in 2015, finishing in 2020. 2020 only has about half of the reports in, so that number will go up for likely all 3 categories. And I just wanted to note that when plants are treated, it's not just herbicide, it does include a manual removal. So over 1.5 million plants were removed manually through this program. Next slide. Everything's the same for the indicators, but this is just a different metric. And so this is the number of treatment sites where the species has actually been eradicated. Next, yeah. So here's a geographical representation of all the different sites in the EDR program. So 64 sites were treated, 17 sites were eradicated. So the species might still exist in the county, but has been eradicated from particular target sites. And 18 invasive species have been addressed. So this one does not fit into our metric framework, but we still thought it was really important to share and wanted to get your guys' input on it. This is for the land management grants, and maybe it's a category that we have to add in, but so you can see on the x-axis, it's the grant cycle and the year, and then Y has the number of land management grant projects for that cycle. And so the funding is relatively the same, but you'll see for the 8th and 9th cycle, it is a bit, or the amount of projects goes up, but that's because Sandag added the small grant program. And again, this is just the geographical breakdown of those grant projects. So we have 116 land management grants. That includes over 3,300 acres managed. 39 different organizations benefited from these grants. That includes 89 native species planted and 16 habitats conserved. Next, I'll pass it over to Emily.
All right, thanks, Sarah. So in addition to gathering all of this metric data and information, we also are developing a system. Yeah, are you waiting?
Yeah, it's just hard to hear you.
Again? Okay, hold on. Okay, is that better? No, shoot.
No.
Is it cutting out?
No, it's just the garble. That was like yesterday.
Okay, does that fix it? That's what normally fixes it. Shoot.
No.
Okay.
You change it to your to the speaker option. You know, down on your little icon where it has the speaker. If you go onto that, can you move it to the other speaker option? It helps me. Sometimes.
Yeah, does that, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
That's better, yeah.
Is that better? I don't think I can hear you. So wave at me again. Okay, I'm just gonna talk until everyone's waving. Okay. So in addition to all this metric information, we need a way to store and organize and then report back out to the public and our stakeholders. And so we've developed a database, which is on a SQL Server database. This structure is based on the one TAM report that we previously reported on. And so you don't need to look at all of these boxes, but each indicator and each metric has standard sets of information, like why was this chosen? What's the current condition? What are desired conditions? And then they also each have a current condition, trend, and confidence. So the condition can be either good, caution, or significant concern. And then the trend is either increasing, decreasing, or steady, and then a confidence about how we feel about each of those. So each metric has that standard set of information, and it's stored in this database. So as an internal tool, we also have forms that allow us to enter this information into uniform methods. And this helps track all of us working together. This will also help as we update these metrics over time. We can go into the database and update these values. And this will automatically generate a PDF report with all of these sections included. In addition to a PDF report, there will be an online dashboard, which will have a subset of these categories available for the public to interact with the data. And so I'm going to show an example of that. Okay, I'm going to use Chaparral as an example of what this dashboard looks like. I showed this briefly in September, so this should look familiar. We have some background information on our metrics. I'm going to go ahead and jump straight to our vegetation metrics. We have 5 vegetation communities: chaparral, coastal sage scrub, grassland, oak woodlands, and riparian forest and scrub. So right now I'm just going to look at chaparral, but in this dashboard we can link to more information such as detailed methods or citations. We have our goal and our threats that were taken from the management strategic plan. This database also links to our website, and so we can link directly back to project or data information, documents, and our MSP objectives and actions. So this database will be fully integrated with the existing website. So for Chaparral, first we have just up front an overall view of our 5 proposed metrics. And I have some draft data to show you what that would look like. So in this case, we have one metric is falling into the good category and the second one is falling into the caution category. Moving down, you get a little more information for each of these 5 metrics. You get the status, trend, and confidence. So good, it's increasing with a moderate confidence, whereas we might have caution and then an unknown trend and a high confidence. So for example, one specific metric, the first one is the percent of chaparral that's conserved and undeveloped. So as a draft, I put together this number of at least 40% of chaparral conserved, and this would be using the 1995 baseline acreages. This number is a draft, and we're very welcome to input, but it was not arbitrary. This was calculated using the hardline PAMA as what would be called the goal of the management plan of all of the planned areas in the Western San Diego. So this does not include the Forest Service land, but then that 40% would be extrapolated to the entire county as well. So our thresholds for good would be 40% of the chaparral conserved. The caution between 18.6 and 40%, that 18.6 came from our baseline conservation at 1995. So significant concern would be below that baseline value. And again, these are all using the standard 1995 acreage values because we have lost about 65,000 acres of chaparral since 1995. So for this metric, our condition is good. We have 525,000 acres of chaparral conserved, and that would be 61% of our original chaparral that was mapped in 1995. This number is increasing. In 1995, 49% was conserved. So again, we've lost about 65,000 total acres of chaparral, but we've gained 101 conserved acreage. And then the confidence is moderate. Some of our vegetation areas have not been updated since the 90s. And so there are some areas, not conserved areas, but there are some areas that we could use some additional vegetation mapping. Then the data for this metric is using the 1995 Holland mapping as well as the Fire Resource Assessment Program. And then the current mapping is from the AECOM 2012. So on the dashboard, you can actually interact with the data live through these maps. These are all interactive with pop-ups that you can explore individual preserves. And then you can also get a look at the trends over time. So 49% was conserved in 1995. As of our current total, we have 66%, but adjusting for the baseline values in 1995, 61% is now conserved. And so that's the type of information that will come out of our database and be available to the public in order to view. So now I'm going to switch back to our PowerPoint and have Chris talk about getting volunteers. Thanks.
Okay, so what this is a table that lists the indicators that we're working on for this first report, State of the Preserve report. And I've divided them up into 5 groups. And what we're hoping is that that EMP working group members will sign up for a group that they're interested in, or more than one if they want to invest that much time. And then we will be holding meetings in February to show you what we've been working on and get your feedback on and get your input. So the first group, group 1, is the landscape scale species and the loss of connectivity threat. And so that's all focusing in on connections within the preserve system. The second group, group 2, is rare and specialist species, including the 2 butterflies and several rare and endemic plants. Group 3 is looking at coastal sage grub, grassland, and chaparral communities, primarily coastal sage grub and grassland, and the species associated with them. So it's looking more at the habitats and the species indicative of those habitats for vegetation communities more specifically. Group 4 is wetlands, and it includes riparian woodlands, oak woodlands, and 1 species from salt marsh. We do not yet monitor salt marsh, so we didn't include that in this round. And then representative species from riparian. And then the final group is more the ecosystem and landscape scale processes. And many of these include things that could be threats at some point, or maybe natural processes that might affect how the preserve system is doing. And this is group 5, and so it includes everything from hydrology, climate, land use, invasive species, and wildfire. And so I think Kim is going to explain how we're going to have people sign up for these groups, but I'll turn it over to Kim to explain.
Yeah, so we're going high tech. Well, actually, Courtney's going high tech, and she'll be sending out a Survey Monkey tomorrow with the breakdowns to get your input. We were going to ask for volunteers virtually today, but I think we won't do that. But I think it'll be, we'll have a meeting, and then it potentially will take, your time for that, and then potentially reviewing some data, or we'll be asking for input. But we don't anticipate it's going to take a lot of your time, but really we're just looking for, EMP working group members who have, we're also tapping into a lot of the experts on these different species and stuff, but we feel like we do have a lot of knowledge in this group. So we would like everyone to get involved. So you will be seeing something from us tomorrow, and I'd appreciate, volunteer for one, volunteer for more than one. It's really up to you. So be on the lookout for that. So Leanne, I think we can ask for questions or comments.
Yeah. So good presentation, covered a lot of stuff. Any comments by our group first of all? Go ahead and raise your hand and turn your video on. Not even Jim? Come on. Okay.
I could tell a joke or something.
Yeah. We're just filling at this point. No,
Yeah, what is it
go
you're
ahead.
asking people to volunteer to do? Maybe that would be a useful question. Like pick a group of some.
Chris? So what we want you to do is look at these groups of species and habitats and threats, or vegetation communities and threats. And if you have a group that you're interested in that subject matter, what we're going to be doing is in February, pulling together virtual meetings and showcasing the kinds of metrics we have and getting your input, like whether you think, what you think about that metric. Do you have suggestions for others, to try to get a better understanding of what other people are interested in, not just the work that we've been doing a lot internally with experts, but we want to broaden that out.
Okay. And your background is deeply eerie.
I know. I don't know what's going on with this. I apologize. I'm at my folks' house and I'm in a corner and I don't have much control of the lighting. Sorry.
I think that was a great presentation today. It's really kind of, I think, hopefully helping people see in their head better, like where we're going with the metrics and how that play out.
This is Trish, and I would say I agree with Robert as well. And I think the reason why you aren't getting comments is because you explained this so well at the last meeting. And so this is just validating your previous work and seeing that you're going in the right direction. So great presentation.
And we're really getting down to, I mean, we've got, I think the SDMMP team have been working hard to pull it all together, and we're getting down to, where we're going to have some sort of a draft report. So your input I think is really timely. So we would appreciate everyone participating.
Well, we can see that it's getting pulled together, coming together. So that's exciting to see. Yeah, do we have, let's see, we have, well, I guess we'll go on to the public since I'm not seeing any hands with the group.
I do have Michael, and I don't know how he got back over there to the
he's
but I will unmute you, Michael. I think you can go ahead. Michael? Nope. I do not see him anymore on the list, so
dropped out.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no other hands.
Oh,
okay.
Michael's back.
Oh.
Michael, can we hear you?
I hope so.
Yes.
God, what an afternoon. So when in February is this happening, Chris? Do you have a date yet?
But we will be scheduling with each group individually to find the best time. And
okay.
So it'll be the kind of thing that once you sign up for a group, then we'll be contacting you.
Okay. And is it just an email to you, or is there, how do you sign up?
Well, we'll be sending that tomorrow. It'll be an email to you with like a survey to sign up.
And who's the email coming from?
It's coming from Courtney.
Okay, I'll look for it. Thanks. And by the way, I concur, really important to be able to see the trends in these situations. Some positive news with the pond turtle finally, and I mean, everything's relative, but it was good to see that. And it's really great that you guys are creating these science-based drivers for getting some significant work done. So thanks.
Well, and I just want to give a shout out to the SDMMP team, because they've been working really hard on this, and I'm very happy with the efforts that they've been putting into each of the species that they're working on, or the communities that they're working on.
It just occurred, sorry, how are you communicating with other land managers who might fit the bill here that aren't EMP participants?
Yeah, we had some workshops, and then we're in the process of reaching out now to species experts again. And what we've been trying to do is based on the original input that we got from a couple of different workshops, both small ones and then the larger EMP working group workshops. We're in the process of compiling the metrics, and then what we'll do is we will bring it forth and bring more people in to comment on them. So not only you all be brought in, but we're bringing in experts
And
to look them over.
And then after that exercise in refining the metrics, what's the follow-up?
So then so we're doing all of this, and then in the end of April, we will be having a draft report, which will have the metrics in it, and we're working on the web portal dashboard as well. That report will go out to you to review, and then we need to finalize it by June, and then get it into the ITALC by July. So there's going to be more review once it's in the report after we get your input at these workshops.
So this is to satisfy that ITALC responsibility, and isn't necessarily intended to, well, it could and obviously will drive implementation strategies and coordination, that sort of thing?
No, it is actually, what we're trying to do is show what work has been done in the preserve and what the status of these species are. And a lot of this information will be very helpful in identifying where we need to focus efforts, maybe where we need new strategies. And so this will all tie back in. This comes from the management and monitoring strategic plan, because this is the information we've been gathering, and it will tie back into this next 5-year plan, which is being created for 2022 to 2026. So it's sort of a loop. I took out, because I didn't want to take too much time. I wanted to let the others speak, but there's a diagram from a previous one where it shows the relationship of the MSP to SANDAG's 2-year work plans, to the metric output, and then how that goes to the board of directors and out to stakeholders, and then the feedback comes back to the MSP to to refine objectives in the next update.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions or comments?
I don't see any other hands.
I don't hear anybody jumping in. So, well, that concludes our meeting today. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, March 9th, 2021 at 1 p.m. And I'm kind of assuming at this point we'll still be virtual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and maybe we'll have a new chair by then. So this meeting today is adjourned.